name is Hervé Lejean. I'm the head of the Value Creation Observatory at EIPM. So it's really a pleasure to be with all of you today. We're going to be looking into the topic of innovation culture in purchasing. So probably there are still, I can see the number of people keeps going up. So what I will do is I will share a little bit with you some of the information related to our audience. So we've got already 17 countries represented in the group, with mainly people coming from Europe, China, and India. Across Europe, we've got people from the UK, Switzerland, from Slovenia, Serbia, from Poland, from France, Germany, Italy, Finland. So quite a very broad representation. We also have people from Russia, also someone who got up very early from Argentina. So really, really nice to have all of you around. Let me take you through maybe the initial objective of the session. So what I like to do is really to take you through a number of important points, I think, in terms of why do we need an innovation culture in purchasing. And I think what's important for me is really to focus on the importance of culture. Then we'll be looking at the 8 determinants of innovation culture. So we've identified through a research project 8 factors, 8 determinants for which we've identified some behaviors, and I will be taking you through some of these. Then we'll go into how to assess and develop an innovation culture in purchasing. So I won't be sharing with you a full methodology, but giving you some suggestions, some practice that can be used. We've tested them, so that's a good opportunity to share them with you after we've been able to see what works and what doesn't work. And we close just by maybe a little bit of a side topic, but if we think in terms of challenging our existing culture, we also need to challenge the way we measure performance. So I've just kept one slide on this topic. During the whole session, you have the possibility to send us some questions. So don't hesitate at any time to ask for some questions. I think you should have something either on the left or on the right where you can just input some questions. So please go ahead. Interrupt whenever you want. That will be a pleasure to be able to exchange with you during the session. We will also have some a few 2 sessions where we'll be asking you some questions, so some simple survey, just trying to get some inputs from all of you. So I can see that the audience is still increasing, but I think now it's time to start. Oh yes, and I'm just being told that all the slides will be available to you at the end of the session. Maybe a point I should also say is currently, I mean, you'll be able to get on our website. If you go on the observatory, you will be able to get a copy that contains a lot of information I will be sharing today. This is our most recent version of the observatory, fostering an innovation culture in purchasing. So this is a sort of a handbook that can go along. It's free to download. Very soon we'll have an enhanced version of it, because I've been conducting some interviews of 2 or 3, actually 3 CPOs in order to have been working on the topic of deploying cultural changes, and they will be these interviews will be added to the content, and we'll release it during our annual conference in December. So just a little bit of of context. I mean, probably if you've been joining this session in the past, you've seen me already presenting this slide with the fifth generation purchasing. I won't, I'm not going to spend some time going through all the stages, but basically the idea is the purchasing function is only adapting to the evolution of the structure of industries and the global economy. So basically, when we look at the latest part of the 20th century, we were facing a world where global competition was increasing, where we were increasingly outsourcing, focusing on quality cost delivery was a job of everyone, and we had to this the challenge associated with sustainability from compliance, risk, and to some extent to the performance aspect. And this was a time where purchasing was back as a strategic function, because of this ongoing slicing and dicing of the value chain and the more global perspective we were bringing from a value chain, supply chain point of view. And I typically date from 2008, the end of this fourth generation purchasing. Why? Not because of the economic crisis. I think it was just somehow, a landmark at that point. But this is the time where we reach the plateau in terms of the percentage of global trade as part of the global GDP. So we started to arrive in a situation where, the globalization was not going any further. It was reaching a plateau. And the new era is much more, described by having very fragmented value chains. We have some of our companies where the supplier is also a competitor, the supplier is also a client sometimes. So it's not like the classic linear type of value chain, much more of an ecosystem with, new technology coming in, which means new companies coming into the going across industries. We've also seen a lot of startups coming into the picture in terms of becoming, suppliers of large companies, and the need to rethink business models, especially thanks to new technology where data is coming on top of hardware and things like this, and everything is increasingly presented as a service. So this is the fifth generation purchasing. Purchasing appears as a new landscape, and we need to adapt to this situation. And I think that the presentation today is really how, in a fifth generation context, when we are facing these changes in terms of ecosystems, value chains, in terms of technology, in terms of business model, how do we remain open, to innovation, and how do we develop a culture that really helps to take advantage of all these challenges. Maybe a few words about innovation and purchasing. I think what's important to have in mind is innovation is always the association of a problem and a solution. So what does it mean for purchasing? It means that we need to go beyond. We need to go beyond, waiting for having a classic functional set of specifications. We need to understand the problems of the business. We need to understand, what are the strategic challenges where we need to bring some novelty to the business. We need to go up in terms of really understanding, what the problems of tomorrow will be, and being very close to the business partners and more specifically the people who are contributing to rethink, how organizations will be competing into the future. On the other hand, we need to look for solutions. So just going to the top 3 suppliers we have in our category or market, that might be a little bit short-sighted. It's still valid for some areas, but in some situations we need to look beyond and sometimes understand supplier of suppliers. We need to understand what type of solutions are coming up from new entry, new players from other industries, in order to combine these problems and solutions together in order to unleash some value. So this is really, innovation is really calling us to extend our scope of work, by going toward the business and the final client in some situations in order to understand their problems and looking beyond the existing supplier and looking at new players coming in, suppliers of suppliers, to understand what type of solutions could contribute to, solve the problems that we have today. So this is this extension that requires to look, beyond what we were usually paying attention to, increase the lenses, increase the frames we have, so we can contribute to some innovation. And the whole topic of culture is very much about allowing to have this much broader perspective on things. So how do we do this? I thought we could start with a short survey on the topic. So what do I need to do, Silmara? Quoi? I think I'm going to need some help, since last time I've not been able to remember how we do this. Yes. So, short survey. So, you should have in front of you questions related to KPI, related to process, 7 steps process, and the focus on culture. So for you, in terms of becoming more innovative, what do we need? You have to press send at the end of the survey. So we've got 15% of the people who've filled in. I can see the progress, 60%. And it's still going up. I know some people are on the phone, so probably we'll be soon reaching the yes. Yeah, I think I'm gonna click on end the voting, and I'm gonna share the result. So in terms of result, when we look at KPI, so there's a strong view that there's a 45% of the participants who really believe that we need to rethink, we need to get new KPIs and innovation. I think we have to discuss this, but my take on it would be that we need to change, how we use and how we leverage measurement. Can we just rely on one single KPI for innovation? I don't really believe this would be doing the trick. Then there's a strong view on processes, with 45% again thinking that we should be having a solid process related to innovation. I think I would agree with this, but I think for me, what's the point is it should be like a multimodal process. So it's not like always kind of following the same steps and always doing the same things as part of the process, but we need to have more opportunities to do things differently depending on the context, and we can come back on this a little bit later. And some of the culture, we also get to a point where we've got 45%, but very few people saying it's really irrelevant. So I think the message you're giving us is we need to have a balance between, how we think about performance measurement, process, and culture for innovation. Very good, very good. So let's go back to the presentation and continue on these elements. Okay, so let me take you through. I mean, something that dates back to the 60s. In fact, some of the scholars who've been looking at innovation, they've identified that different types of organization are good to produce very efficient processes, efficient activities, rich efficiency. This is what they call the mechanistic, that are very good in a very stable environment. But then, when you need to be able to deliver some, when you're confronted to rapid changes and you need to deliver innovation, you will have different types of organization. So the mechanistic type of organization, they operate with a very traditional hierarchy, with everything's coming from the tops, both in terms of the goals and the targets, and falling down to the individuals. They operate with very formal rules, like a single procedure to everybody should be following in terms of getting things done. Communication is, is very much vertical, coming from the top and telling everyone, the state of things and what they need to be done. And decision making is also very mechanical, in the sense of, you need to apply some form of a very rational, process in terms of the selection of the supplier or who you're going to be working with into the future. So this is a very, mechanistic perspective. But as soon as we go into innovation, then we need to have more organic type of organization that will allow to have more rapid change. Less rigid organization, is the first one. If you want to be able to, catch an opportunity in terms of innovation, we should be able to, I don't know, take some people out of existing job and put them on a very specific project for a certain amount of time. So we need to be able to challenge the way we get things organized. Today, with everything's coming in terms of new technology, it's more difficult to spread things in terms of software, hardware, and services. And sometimes, you might need to get someone who's going to be the single point of contact for the business partners and some suppliers onto a very, innovative project that's going to be combining some element of services, some element of hardware, and some software. So we need less rigid type of organization for that. The rules, we need to have fewer rules. We need to have more flexible rules. As soon as we engaged in situation where we have uncertainty, if we immediately from the start of it, we start to impose a lot of criterion, then we prevent the possibility for thinking outside of the box. We kind of constrain all the project and all the situation, and we are unable to come up with something that's going to be fitting all the constraints that we will have from the beginning. So we need to focus on fewer rules, higher level principles, and be more flexible in the way we can go about a specific project. And communication needs to be much more multi-directional, needs to, you can build on multiple views and multiple source of knowledge, multiple experience. So this is not, something coming from the top as the target is, but something that's much more fluid and coming from all the. And in terms of decision making, we can't just apply very strict rules. We need to be able to, get people involved in a more participatory, way, and being able to understand, what could work, what would not work, and then, to be able to test some hypothesis, come back to the decision-making process, and move ahead with this. So today, if we want to contribute to innovation in purchasing, we need to bring some of the principle of organic type of organization that can adapt to rapid changes with less rigid organization, more flexibility, fewer rules, multidimensional and multiple directions for communication, and more participatory decision making. So just, setting one KPI and one goal for it and deploying it across every single person working in the purchasing organization, I don't think this is going to work. I think we need to have something slightly more open, but also flexible and maybe a little bit more sophisticated than, the classic way of thinking we have in purchasing about, having one kind of target we can break down to every individual. I've seen some organization, deciding to measure the number of innovation proposed by people in the purchasing function. I think it's fine as a way of creating this kind of a bottom-up type of thinking to bring attention to the topic inside the organization. But I don't see that as being the great way of measuring things over the long term. Rewriting work instruction, I've used the word work instructions in the sense mentioned before of having procedures. So there's no procedure just to deliver innovation. You need to be much more flexible. You need to use different tools, different approaches depending on the context. If you're looking for something that your company has never been exposed to work with a supplier who's got a totally different set of knowledge, and internally you don't have the way to assess. I mean, even your way of qualifying suppliers need to be rethinking in this type of situation. So just adding a KPI and adding to the existing process by putting a few more elements in it is not going to be the right way of deploying innovation across the organization. So my conclusion is quite simple: is culture matter. When we can't get things just by driving people through a KPI or driving people by a set of instructions, what's really important is to pay attention to the culture, make sure the organization can slowly develop a culture that's going to be conducive to achieving some innovation and contributing to innovation. I think there's a little story that's really outlining, what we mean by culture. It's the story of the scientist who decided to, place 5 monkeys in a cage, and they've been putting some bananas on top of a ladder. And every time a monkey was going to the top of the ladder, then they would be, throwing water at them, getting them totally soaked with cold water. So after a while, every time a monkey was, being to the top of the ladder, then they would be grabbing the one that would be going on top and kind of telling him that you don't do this because all of us we get totally soaked when we do this. Huh? So after some time, nobody's ending up anymore going to the top of the ladder. And what happened is, every time they bring a new player, the player sees the bananas on top of the ladder, so they try for this, and the whole group is beating the new member, who's trying to go to the top of the ladder. And at the end, when you get to a situation where every member of the team of monkeys have been replaced, when you have a totally new group of monkeys inside this room, well, you get to a situation where you still replicate the behavior. Every time someone is coming in and trying to, get to the top of the ladder to grab the bananas, then he gets bitten by the other ones. And, this is exactly the kind of things where, we end up to say, well, why do we do this? Well, I don't know. That's how things are done around here for many, many times. So maybe in fourth generation purchasing, we've been saying to people, well, don't look into these small and kind of less financially sound type of suppliers, and we shouldn't be looking at this. We need to have less suppliers and bigger suppliers, stronger suppliers, in order to have a more reliable supply chain. And there's a bit of a uncomfort, going into this type of new things. So that's how, the culture gets impacted. That's how over time, well, we end up just doing the same thing as in the past. And we don't really know why. And a lot of the culture is actually all about this, about the behaviors and the beliefs that have been part of the way we do things, and actually, we don't challenge them anymore. Maybe a bit of a definition. It's culture, according to Geert Hofstede, was collective programming of the minds that distinguish the members of one group versus another group. So it's really about how we see the world, and it touches, upon a number of things: architecture, dress code, corporate design, strategy statement, but also a lot of things that are unwritten, and that even transpire in very day-to-day things, like the way we greet each other every morning. If we look at other scholars who've been writing about culture within business and organization, they tend to show these elements using the iceberg. So of course at the top you've got the architecture, the furniture, the dress code, which are visible to everyone, and then you've got the espouse values, like the vision that's on the wall, the strategies, the policies that express in a way or another what the values are about. But deep inside the organization, you've got all the assumptions, the tradition, the unwritten rules, the belief that are much more difficult to bring to the surface, to visualize, and to change. Think of mergers, think of acquisition. For how long the practice of what used to be two companies are still operating in the merged company. So it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of challenge to get these unwritten rules and belief to evolve. Okay, so let me get now to how we got to what we did in terms of developing a framework about innovation culture. So I've been working with some of my colleagues on the research side, and what we've done is, first we went through the literature. We looked at everything that has been published in terms of innovation and culture. What are the different factors that really help in terms of developing an innovation culture, or are a sign that an innovation culture is in place. We got to a point where we had something like 12 different elements that we started to put together, group together. Then I had an MBA class where some of my students were asked to look into those 12 elements, to rank them by the level of importance, but also by how much they would be meaningful within a procurement group. And we ended up selecting 8 in the end. We changed a little bit the vocabulary as well. So this was a way for getting from the full picture on the literature to a set of 8 factors. What we did is, from the literature, we were also able to put together a survey, trying to understand if the different elements that we've been compiling were challenging and were demanding, but also were resonating with people in purchasing, and I'll be showing you some of the outcomes of this. So when we started to have a strong and solid base in terms of, yes, we've got some determinants that are really meaningful and for which we can see they can be challenging for an organization. We had a very large workshops. We involved 105 purchasing managers and purchasing executives in describing for each of the 8 determinants what type of behaviors. So we asked them to reflect on their experience. We asked them to explain what has worked for them in terms of behaviors that support this, and what they would want to see doing into the future. And we gathered all the input of all these sessions. So it was very much involving participants, involving professionals in creating this framework. And from this, we've been able to synthesize, and this is what, more or less what you will be able to find here. Then when we've been able to build all this description of the determinants of innovation culture, we looked at how to help the organization to absorb some of these elements, to live these elements on a day-to-day basis. We'll be sharing toward the end. But what we've done is we've developed some simple tools on this, and we've been testing them, as part of some of the training we had. So we had situations where we got people to prepare, to organize some, build some stories, organize some rituals, and we prototype these type of activities. We're in the process still of adjusting by bringing some of the feedback elements into the picture, but also through the few additional interviews with some CPOs who've been actively supporting cultural change in their organization. And then by the end of the year, we expect to further share. And today is kind of the first sharing on a broader scale of the outcome of these very participatory research project, where we really involved a lot of people. I mean, overall, if you look at all the steps we've got more than 200 people who've been professionals, executives, purchasing managers who've been involved in this process. So, what are the 8 determinants? So, we'll be going through them in more depth, but discovery, being able to explore and discover new things is an important determinant of an innovation culture. Creativity, which is about bringing some fresh perspective on rather complex problems, is another one. Perseverance, knowing when we need to push and challenge things in order to get a result, and personal drive is important. Autonomy, we can't innovate without a certain level of autonomy on how we not only set, but also how we design the means to achieve our objectives. Challenging is also an important one. This, in the survey, this was the one that was the most common. So questioning and challenging new ideas was a strong element coming out of the whole survey and the whole process. Leadership, so leaders who can really support everyone to move into the right direction in terms of innovation. Taking risk, this is really some element where as part of the testing, the adjusting, we've seen some of the challenges. We are a function that's very often risk adverse. Part of our job is to identify risk, but innovation is about taking risk. So this is creating somehow some form of ambiguity where we really need to understand, how to evolve our attitude toward risk and taking some of the valuable risk and still, fighting against some of the negative risk. And diversity is not just about people, but it's also about practices and also to some point about the suppliers. We need to bring some element of diversity. So those are the 8 determinants that we've been able to identify that within an organization that's actually innovative and contributing to innovation from a purchasing standpoint. We should see these elements being practiced on a day-to-day basis, being part of what everybody is doing across the organization. I think it's not just about purchasing. I think we have a role not just in adopting these, but also in terms of helping other functions become more creative by exposing them to ideas from outside. We have a role that's not just inside, but we have a role in terms of favoring the adoption of these determinants inside the organization. So this was the questions we have from the survey. We had about 100 people who've been surveyed at that time, and the result will be there's a broader set of questions. We will be communicating on them during 2019, where we've just extracted the element that relates to culture. So the one that's the most, I would say, we feel the most at ease with was this challenging element that we have here. Perseverance was also a strong one we have, and being able to come up with perspective on problems. And And this is self-declaration. So this is people from in a purchasing role saying, we are good at challenging in my organization, we are good at persevering, we are good at, being creative and bringing this fresh perspective on complex problems. Some of the lowest one, discovery. For me, this was an interesting and somehow surprising, because part of our role is to be outside, is to see new things, is to bring new ideas from the market, and this is not one where we seem to be doing extremely well. Another one is diversity of our practices, diversity of the people, and the other one that I've already mentioned is risk taking. So if some of them we already have some organization or a good number of organizations that have some good degree of maturity, on the left side, we've got some that are a bit below in terms of this level of maturity. But I think it means also that we're not starting from scratch, and there's quite a lot of things that have already been done. So maybe now I should be going in a number of elements, trying to describe very briefly. You can take some time to look at the document I've mentioned. So I'm not here to read the slides, but just to describe a little bit and try to make it a bit more concrete. What do we mean by each of these elements? So when we talk about discovery, this is very much at about business intelligence. Gathering information across the market, across the different players, looking beyond the obvious in terms of having interaction with new players within our industry and other industry, and sometimes, in order to further discover what would work and would not work, being able to get into the exploration mode. So I think more and more, we see cases. I'm not sure this is fully systematic and managed in a structured way in companies, but we see more cases of companies going outside of the traditional industry. I've worked recently with a pharma company. So for some of the instrumentation product, they've been to the automotive world, in order to bring some suppliers from automotive, in order to develop and co-develop and come up with some new instruments they could be using on their side. So the whole process of discovery is about looking beyond our traditional market and traditional players. In terms of diversity, so I think there's diversity in terms of people. So making sure we bring more people from within the organization, but other function, and we export people to the rest of the organization. That we should be much more open to, I think when we look at the number of situations where, for a buyer position, we simply recruit someone who's got experience with purchasing, and even, the number of times I see people looking for a specialist of a given market, I think we should be much more open to, bring on board some people who had some experience maybe in some markets, but it's pretty easy and pretty quick to, teach them how to do some of the fundamentals of purchasing and be very, very rapidly capable of contributing. So, I think we need to be much more daring in terms of bringing some new profiles and new candidates into the picture. I think it's also very much a matter of also broadening the set of practices we have. So what I see recently is, a lot of purchasing organizations across, different sector, whether we talk about whether we talk about automotive, whether we talk about pharmaceutical companies, whether we talk about the automation world, whether we talk about electricity business, I've seen some attempt to broaden the type of practice that we're using. So I've seen companies trying to go very much into the direction of running some agile RFQ by shortening the time. I've seen some companies organizing a lot of workshops with suppliers in order to get some innovation. I've seen some companies using some form of crowdfunding tools, crowdsourcing tools, not funding, but crowdsourcing tools, to get access to ideas and new opportunities. I think the biggest challenge today, is probably to be able to use a diversity of this practice in the right way, knowing where and when this one will be the most supportive. Today, we tend to do a lot of things through the traditional RFP process. We're starting to have to this, but we need to get to a point where we've got 5, 6 different ways of, addressing different level of uncertainty, and therefore we should be capable of, better using a broad diversity of tools. Probably this will be a topic for a future webinar or something we can discuss into the future. So next one is about taking some risk. Which is absolutely essential to be ambitious and to deliver some significant return on investment. If we don't have some element of uncertainty, then it's probably we're not bringing something that's really challenging and new, and that's going to bring some of the innovation. So here, sometimes what's interesting is, well, we need to accept looking situation. We need to something that's new might not be existing in 10 flavors on the market. So we should be able to accept, to have a situation where we need to go ahead with a single supplier and live with this for a certain amount of time. We need to accept failure. We need to find ways of failing fast, but we need to be able that, not every ways of selecting is going to give us the right answer in this type of a situation. And what we need always to think of is the risk of doing nothing. Right? So very often there's more risk about doing nothing than just about trying one thing. I've been working recently with a company very much involved in automation, and what's been interesting is what we've decided to do is to set primary goals, very high-level goals in terms of what we want to achieve in terms of innovation with some suppliers for the next generation of product. And then what we did is we set up a number of a lower-level type of expectations and requirements. We will see over time if we will be able to comply with all of them, or if we can bring some of them on board. So right from the start, putting less constraints under the selection mechanism. And what was interesting is this company has been working with 7 different suppliers coming from different business models, different industries, in order to test over a period of a year what would be the best combination. Best combination in terms of skills, best combination between their people and the supplier, but also looking at what could be the best combination of suppliers to come up with this type of innovation. So something very different from a one-size-fits-all type of a process where we're going to end up with the right supplier after applying a similar set of criteria that we've been using always in the past. So accepting risk is an important one. Then autonomy is also absolutely essential. So yes, we should have people capable of contributing to the definition of their goals and objectives. As we move simply beyond achieving savings, but we want to contribute to value, the person who are in charge of a category should be the best place to understand. If we look at this business unit, if we look at that business unit, if we look at that country, if we look at this factory or site, then we should be focusing on this element, that element. So financial objectives are easy to define and break down, but as soon as we want to set up targets and objectives that deliver higher level of value, we're going to have to be taking some decisions, and teams should have more autonomy in being able to define together with their stakeholders what is the most important point to focus on. And they should have also some more freedom to define their own goals. I'm still totally shocked, thinking that in order to go to a fair and to see who are the new suppliers coming into the picture, I mean, most of the buyers need to have a permission from one person and sometimes 2 persons above, and they're being told, it's we can't send everyone there, and you shouldn't be going to all of these, and sometimes we can't. So you're going to go in 2 years because we don't have the budget for this. If we want to contribute to innovation, if we want to be part of this broader delivery of the transformation of companies, people should have a budget, should have some resources that allow them to be able to get access to the information, meet the right people at the right time, be able to attend. Of course, this comes with expectation. This is not about meeting all the suppliers we know at the fair. This is not about just having discussions with amongst it is about going together with the people from R&D, the people from marketing, and then going through this, spending 70% of the time meeting new players that will be bringing interesting ideas and new things. So yes, I think there's a need to have more autonomy in the ability to explore, for instance, for a lot of purchasing team. There should be also ways of accessing money. I know that Hugues from Suez is attending this workshop, and what was interesting in some of the practice they've implemented, that they've been able to go to the fund, innovation fund of the company, and say, hey, we're working on an innovation project with a supplier. Is it possible to get access to some of this pool of money, the innovation fund of the company, in order to test some new ideas, try to move on with something quite new and innovative, and they've been able to do this. And this is absolutely important. If we want to be able to innovate, at some point we should be able to access some resources, access some funds, access some capabilities that can help us to test things and come back with some informed decision. Without this, if we don't have the autonomy to do this type of things, well, then we'll just be fishing in the usual places where we go and bringing usual type of performance. Leadership, I think without surprise, this is a fundamental element here. I think we need to get back a lot on some of the basics. I think we need to get back to communicating much more about the vision of the company. We need to communicate much more about the values, and we need to act as role models for the full organization. I mean, this is the most impacting factors in terms of making sure that an organization is behaving in a certain way. We need to walk the talk. This is kind of obvious, but I'm not so sure that we do enough in this field. And I'd like to encourage everyone to reflect on their practice of, how often do we communicate about the values? How often do we look at things from the perspective of the vision of the company? How often, do we really spend some time on these elements? And the most important duty from a leadership point of view is really to create a safe environment. I mean, we can't ask people to, contribute more to this, more to that, and then blame and say this is wrong to a number of things. We need to also sometimes protect our people from other functions when there's some very strong reaction. We need to create this safe environment where people can feel like daring and doing things. If we don't do this, then we won't be able to do anything that's going to go in the right direction. We need to jump and cut the pipe, and so nobody gets blown with water. If I follow with the metaphor of the story of the monkeys we've seen before. And I think from companies I've seen that are part of the Peter Krajcik Award, one of the very important message I would bring to everyone is the top purchasing leaders spend 15–20% of their time purely on coaching and giving feedback to people. So the people aspects, the development of the talent should be, taking a lot of the time. And this is just the formal aspect, but there's much more than this if we think that we're acting as role models. So I think this is, very important, and we need to be able to have this kind of situational leadership where we can change behavior depending on situation where, yeah, we might be needing a bit more of a efficiency at some places and have some more creative and innovative aspects in another one. Creativity, which is about coming up with a new, fresh perspective that can help to address some of the complex problems. I think a lot of it is not about working remotely, working with distance from the business partner or from the supplier, but it's actually about creating some of the interaction. Creativity is not just about being creative on your own. Creativity is about bringing people together, confronting perspective in a safe environment, and making sure that new ideas can come out of this, new ways to look at the problem can come out of this. So it's not about the cult of the individuals who's going to come up with a brilliant idea, but it's about really creating the interactions and the possibilities for the business partners, the suppliers, some of the experts from the industry to confront point of views and suggest different ways of doing things. For instance, you know, as soon as we're getting into a new field in terms of purchasing, that we need to go into some new areas, you know, we should be able to, you know, screen everybody's experience inside the company and ask for, you know, 10% of the time of some people who had experience with something. So, you know, we can get access to the right people. We have experienced maybe some situation in past companies before, for instance. Next one is about perseverance. I think this is a very important one. Of course, this is not about being stubborn. You know, this is about, you know, sometimes showing patience, commitment, determination when we believe that you know, something is of value. It's not about saying I'm right, I know better. It's accepting sometimes the ambiguity, trying to always reconcile what we hear as an objections to some ideas and what the good things that we can bring to the parties. I don't know if some of you have seen a video on internet about the Seabeam project, and you see two Australian surfers, you know, who are creating a sort of a little sort of a, you know, beam that you can put into an harbor, and that's going to be swallowing all of the plastic. Well, actually, this is manufactured and has been co-designed by a company that's located not far away from where I am today, so in the east of France, not very far away from Switzerland. And basically, the buyer, the person in charge of purchasing, was one day into a conference, and he decided to start a discussion about sustainability. So sometime in conferences, you can ask for a room and start discussing a point. So this was about sustainability, and he saw coming into the room, you know, two people from this, the two surfers who said, "We've been working on this. We have a prototype. We want to take it further." There was a big oil company in the room who offered a lot of money to the two guys, as long as their name was associated to the oil company. But the two surfers said, "Well, you know, this is not how we see things. You know, we'd rather work with a smaller organization." And they came back to the purchasing manager of the organization who started the discussion, who went back to his boss and said, "You know, boss, you know, I've just found two guys that invented something amazing to clean the harbor." The company was doing some of the stuff you find in marinas, like pontons and all the equipment you find. So this would be a very nice additional product we could have on, and this would be a very nice contribution to clean all the plastic. And the CEO said, "Tell me more about it." So we just met these two surfers, and the guy said, "Well, no way. I mean, I'm not going to start to put money on something that sounds like a funny project." So the purchasing manager, a few days after, was having a meeting with the head of a big harbor, and he dared to say, "Well, you know, I've got these two surfers, I've got this idea. You know, we don't have money to support that project, but this could be a great stuff." And the president of the harbor said, "Well, you know, I can give you a certain amount of money in order to go ahead, and here it is. It's on the table." And you know, the guy from purchasing came back and said to the CEO, "I've got the two guys, we've got their ideas, they've got their prototype. We now have, you know, a very important, they managed to get 80,000 euros, I think. So now we can go and start to test it." Of course, you know, the idea was the harbor would be having the exclusivity and the prime not exclusivity, but they would be the first one to be able to use it and communicate about it. And today, this is making 20% of the revenue of the company. So this is a totally new product line that has been added, and this is actually cleaning the ocean. So, this is a very clear and simple way of talking about perseverance by sharing you this example. Last point, I think, is determinant is the ability to challenge, confront some of the ideas. I think this one is, something we've seen in many situations, because when we've been going through the process of globalizing our way of doing things, going to suppliers outside of the traditional countries, we've seen a lot of resistance, and we've been able to, challenge the traditional mindset of, I just want to work with my local supplier. So this is something that we've done. But this is also something we should be accepting. We should also accept to be challenged on our, sometimes our preconceived ideas and the way we look at things. So that was the overview, related to the 8 determinants. Do you have any questions at that stage? This was at the same time long and short, so probably we could be discussing and debating some of these elements for much longer. But if you have any question related to some of these elements, very happy to try to answer that right now. Yeah, I have a question. So the question is about yes, the question is about some of these elements can be contradictory. I think that's one of some of the classic situation when we have when on some situation we need to challenge, another we need to persevere. And I think the key behind that is to really ask ourselves the question: how can I test some new ideas fast? And this is the whole concept of innovation. This is about setting up some ways of testing hypotheses, learning from them, finding a safe way of getting feedback on a certain opportunity, and being able to come back to the decision meeting with better information. So instead of trying to get it right first time over a long period, what we need to is to break down things, allow for ambiguity, allow for diverging objectives, allow for not having the full solution, but just really test some of the assumptions in the fastest as possible way, by starting to develop a prototype, by working with an innovation with a client in a way that's safe and that's not going to create a lot of issues. Okay, no other questions for the time being? Hey, let's go ahead. So I think one of the things that I would all encourage you to do is just to go back to the document and start to look through. What you have is pages where, for instance, you will be saying on the left side, what is it that you would be avoiding for a certain determinant, what you should be fostering. Today, I've been focusing on sharing with you, the behaviors we should foster, and I've not been sharing too much about the behaviors we need to avoid. And then maybe you should come up with a list of behaviors, maybe 5, 6, 7, that you would like to encourage. Trying to pick some of the points you would see as being the first building block you want to push for, foster, bring along across your organization. So that would be my #1 recommendation: is if you want to drive your organization further in terms of innovation, it's not just about tweaking your KPIs. It's not about just adding a lot of elements to the process, but that can be useful. But think in terms of behaviors. Think in terms of what you would like people to see acting in accordance with. How do you want them to react? There's a very simple way of defining the culture. It's how people behave when the boss is not in the room. So how would you like to your people to behave in terms of contributing to innovation when they have a meeting with some of their internal stakeholders, when they're looking at what's new on the supply market. You want them just to put in Google and ask for innovation and the name of the industry, or do you want them to go and discuss and exchange with multiple players? So I think it's really important to just to think in terms of the behaviors. And we've all been there. We've all been writing these brochures where we describe the values and we put that on the card. Okay, I say this won't work. I mean, this can be useful. This can be something that you might want to do, but this is not enough. This is not what's going to help challenge things. Why? Well, I think because we need to unlearn. We need to abandon some of our ways of looking at things. And I think it goes back deep into some of our childhood sometimes. If you take the red hood, we've been told that we should never be exploring deep into the woods. And sometimes if we want to innovate, we need to go into some of the darker woods and be able to find some of the gems that we wouldn't be able to find on the roads where everybody is walking. We've been told that we shouldn't be one of these the little pig who's building a temporary houses very quick and fast. But yes, if we want to bring some innovation, sometimes we need to build temporary solution and learn and react fast. So maybe we need to rethink a little bit our view of building some of these big fort and very strong houses. And we've been told that we should not be trying fruits from strangers. We shouldn't be, paying attention to the startups that are, offering some interesting elements, or maybe not always a startup, but a mid-sized company coming up with something interesting. Well, this is a little bit white snow, so stay away from these strangers. Follow the artist. Sometimes we stay away as soon as we see someone who's a bit unusual in his behavior, in his way of acting. And sometimes we need to follow the artist. And Peter Pan, we love Peter Pan as a kid, but as we grow up, we end up, this is a maverick. He's just too childish and playful. Well, actually, we need a bit more Peter Pan in our purchasing organization. We need a bit more people that can rally many other people and can look at the world from a different angle. So yes, we've been told not to be this maverick. And like Pinocchio, we've said, stop playing and having fun and be a grown-up and go to school. And yes, but in many ways, innovating is about creating a very playful environment. And people are attractive to a playful organization. You're not going to convince people from your suppliers to deliver the best to you simply because you've established the best contract between both organizations. You attract them, you get the most out of them, because you create a playful environment, because you allow for, a bit more of a maverick thinking, because you're ready to try some of the new food, because you're ready to, do some temporary experimentation. So my message here is communicating about the values, communicating about the behaviors, changing a KPI, is not going to help us immediately to unlearn. It's not going to help us to challenge our ways of thinking. We need to do something, a bit more deep and a bit more strong about this, because, it's not just about job. It's a broader sense of, us being afraid of, taking some actions. So if we look at the literature on corporate culture, there's a very well-known book from Terry Deal and Arthur Kennedy. So how do they say that culture gets evolved over time? So values, belief are important. That's why we focused on gathering some of the behaviors, listing them, and that's why we say you should be picking some of the behaviors you think are the most important. Stories and myth. Very often companies go back to their founders every time there's a new challenge, and they find the right story that can help us, to relate to a certain point. You know, I've worked a lot with a company like Robert Bosch. So when it was a time about quality, they would get from Mr. Robert Bosch a quote about the importance of customer. About risk, they would have quotes as well from the founder. But I think we need to be much more inclusive, and bring many more stories, share stories of what has worked and what embeds these different types of behaviors we have, and we need to be much more active to ensure that people who've been doing interesting things can share their stories across the organization. Heroes are the people who get rewarded and celebrated. So I'm not going to go there because I'm not sure we should be starting to create heroes, but at least we need to be able to recognize individuals who've done things in a way that can act as an exemplar case for others. So we need to recognize people who've been doing things differently, and so they can serve as a other case for change for the other. Rituals, I think, are very important. Whatever we do, whatever company we are governed by a lot of rituals. How we discuss problems, when we discuss problems, what type of meetings we have, and what's allowed to say, not allowed to say. And very often, if we want to get people to think differently, get people to behave differently, we need to bring new rituals into the place. For instance, you can have a 30-minute stand-up meeting just to tell everybody can come up with anything and share what makes them happy, what makes them concerns. Organize that once a week. That's really a way of ensuring that people feel they can freely speak. Of course, you need to behave in a way that's welcoming and allowing this type of new ways of opening everybody's to discussing different things in a positive manner. So I'm going to be focusing on stories and rituals here, sharing with you some tools about that. But please have in mind that communicating the visions, communicating about the values, organizing some workshops relating to the behaviors, discussing them with your teams across the world at a certain moment of time, organizing a very broad communication plan so people can share some of their experience, these kind of things. All that is good, and acting as a role model as well. So it's not just about what I'm going to discuss now. I think it's just two elements as part of a broader plan, and the importance of leaders taking this into consideration. One of the things that I think is important is to help people to share stories, and stories are very important in order to change the culture. People need to believe that it can work. So, for instance, I've been teaching on the topic of innovation. I'm probably training something like 250, 300 people every year just on the topic of innovation in purchasing. And the main piece of feedback I get every time is thank you for all the stories you've been sharing, because you've been giving us examples from different industries, from different, from direct, from indirect, from different categories. And really stories are very useful to help people show that things are possible, that how they were done in some situations, and really, creating the appetite for people to do things differently. And I think it's down to how we tell stories. And so very often, we just then talk about the outcomes. We've done this differently and we got that result. And I think what's very important is to be able to go through the element of a story. We were working on this, and then we faced that problem. And then we thought, we need to find another way. We had the aha moment when we realized there was a different supplier that could help us with something. And then we did this. We overcame some challenges. This is the result we got. And what I've learned from this situation is this one. So when we share stories, we need to encourage people not just to say, this was the goal, this was the outcome, this is how much we've been able to save out of it. Is really come up with a broader, story that really show that we've been adapting, we've been facing problems, we've been overcoming problems, and what we've learned from it. So we've created this kind of a simple picture that can help, anyone somehow to craft and draft the stories that makes a difference. So probably as the start, you're looking into developing, helping, new culture to emerge. We just need to encourage people to write stories, put them into, some simple booklets, share them on the in different meetings and things like that. But make sure you don't just focus on the outcome, but you also focus on how you bump into problems, how you got the idea. That's what makes them real life, and that's what can really help to convince others that, oh, I can do it as well. So that was my first point, just about stories. And the second one is about creating some of the rituals. The rituals can be a very short meeting, very simple session. It can be about recognizing people who've been doing things in a different way. It could be about, for instance, having a category meeting from time to time when everybody is expected, everybody from the business is invited, everybody dealing with the category at different level can be invited, and just sharing some of the early warning signals, new things that's been on the market, new needs. So not focusing on what we do on the usual way. So really being able to recreate some types of sessions where people can share information, people can do things together, people can get recognized for some of the behaviors. So here we've just built a very simple kind of a framework. My ritual is about going further in terms of discovery. The purpose is to make sure that all of us will see that we can have some values of looking beyond the obvious when we're looking at the external market. What are the principles? What are the rules in the meeting? So no criticism, build on each other ideas, these kind of things. What is the agenda? So setting up like how you see the meeting going. What behaviors you want to encourage as part of this meeting? Who can join this ritual, this session? What will be the sign of success? How do you know you've been making progress? And how do you want to make sure that you get prepared before all of these rituals? So I think it's important. It's not about multiplying these, but maybe sometime we need to have a weekly session. We need to have a monthly session. We need to have a quarterly session on specific aspects that really can help everybody to speak up, everybody to demonstrate some of the behaviors and possibly to recognize some of the behaviors. I've been interviewing a CPO that was telling me something I found interesting is when they have their supplier day last week. They had their supplier day last week. They didn't recognize the supplier. They didn't say we give an award to this company. They were actually giving the award to teams from their company and teams from the supplier. And after the winning teams were expected to come on stage and to use a sense of humor to describe some of the best moments that we've been having together. And the power of people laughing, the power of the people being recognized and not just the organization is absolutely essential. And really, I think this is the type of rituals we need to think a bit more about. Focusing on putting people forward, focusing on putting the right behaviors forward, focusing on, talking about things without being, the serious in the way we can be very often in large corporation. So think about simple rituals that you could bring to your organization that can help to reinforce some of the behaviors you want to see in order to build an innovation. Maybe last word about measurement. So I've said a few things. I've said that the KPI is not going to deliver what we really want in terms of behaviors. This is not a KPI that's going to change the culture. And I think we need to get to a point where we need to have a more balanced perspective. We need to have a different way of looking at how we measure things in purchasing. When we talk classically about the efficiency, you know, how many people we need in order to deliver the full job, how many, you know, we deliver in terms of savings. I think it will always be fine to measure these elements, but they should be occupying the center stage all the time. As we move forward in terms of maturity, as we move into a fifth generation purchasing, this is just one element. And this is some of the basics we need to communicate to finance, but they shouldn't be occupying the center stage of what we do. This is not by adding an extra element, KPI number 3, about innovation ideas, that we are going to change the behavior. If we had an extra KPI and we set targets, everybody is, you know, should be coming with 3 innovative ideas per year, what do you get? Okay, you will for sure get some suggestions, get things, but this is not really going to deliver, you know, the change of behavior. This is not going to contribute to do things differently. Everybody's going to be working on getting the numbers right. Yeah. So I think what's important in this world is to do two things. We should be communicating much more about the projects, seeing purchasing as a pipeline of projects where the main goal is not just about the savings, but the main goal is about, you know, the benefits we bring to the final client, we bring to the user, we bring to the stakeholder, and communicating extensively about this. We contribute already to a lot in terms of value, in terms of innovation. But because we spend all our time focusing on the left part of the graph, we don't spend the time communicating and making everybody see that all of these projects are simplifying the life, are bringing some added value, are helping to do things differently from a business point of view for the final client, for the internal users, and so on. So we need to measure these types of outcomes over time, and we need to, you know, be very clear. This was not achieved just by purchasing, but this was a collective achievement that we've managed to get together with the stakeholders. And the third dimension, we need to look at our people. Okay, if we simply focus every performance discussions on savings, if we simply focus them on efficiencies and how to calculate things, well, there will be nowhere we're going to be able to, you know, get people to put their attention. They want to. I tell you, you know, I'm working with teaching, training so many people. They're willing to try things to be done differently. But if the measurement system is driving all their attention, you know, to one single measure, then there won't be, the rest will be just a cherry on the cake. So we need to create systems of recognition, systems of measuring the evolution of individuals. That's not just looking at savings, but also looking at contribution to a number of value factors. So what I think could be done is, you know, simply there's a lot of different things you could do. You know, you can take all the projects and put some tags, and as soon as people have done 3 outstanding projects under sustainability, innovation, customer something, you know, risk, whatever, you know, then they should be recognized by, you know, receiving a sort of medals or something related to this. A little bit like in, you know, in the video games, you know, we are continuously told that we've passed a certain, you know, a certain level, that we've achieved, you know, a certain progress. So a positive reinforcement in terms of, you know, our contribution to be and incarnate some of the behaviors, some of the value that we want to bring to the company. It can be, you know, having a sort of competition internally where everybody can suggest some project where they've been contributing to value and innovation, pre-selecting them by, I've seen that in a company, the top management pre-selects 12, 15 projects, and then everybody's voting on their preferred project. And at the end, some of the winners are announced during, you know, the reunion of the buyers. So finding a way of, you know, creating this positive recognition, that's not just focusing on, you know, the left side of the board, but that's looking at this element and how people are really driving this forwards. So we need to have an hybrid measurement logic where on one hand, we deliver, and we measure our performance, and we tell finance that we've done the job from that point of view, and some of the business unit that really needs it. On the other hand, we should be communicating about achievements in terms of benefits we deliver, and on the people side, we need to put forward much more the behaviors and measure the contribution of individuals to different types of elements of value created, different types of behavior generated over time. So I don't have the full way. I think every company needs to think about that and find ways of rebalancing the measurement system, having some element that really relates to the values and the vision, making sure you get the basics right on the savings, and communicating to the business all the good things that have been done. So in the end, I'm pretty sure that if we all move into this direction, in a lot of companies in the future, there will be some people leaving that heroes are working in procurement. They go out, they find new ideas, and they protect our companies from disruption, and they help us to bring additional value to the business. Any question at this stage? Any reaction? Any feedback? Any point you would like to bring? I have a last survey for you, but very quiet. Okay. So getting started. I'm just giving you an idea here. Maybe organize a large workshop. I've got a question. Let me get back to my picture of do you have examples? I have examples of I think I've tried to give you a lot of examples on the different behaviors. I can give much more of these in maybe in a separate setting. But let me give you examples. One of the CPO I've been interviewing recently is the CPO of Essilor. So in Essilor, on a systematic way, whenever they deliver presentation inside the company or with suppliers, what they do is they show the values. This is the second slide of the presentation, and they provide examples of how the values and the behaviors have been applied within purchasing, how they contribute to deliver some of the benefits purchasing is bringing to the organization. Also, in this organization, they've set up a lot of mechanisms that allow people to share their practice, to be recognized. So on a very regular basis, they have newsletters where they talk about some of the good practice, some of the good incarnations of the values that have been put forward by some of the people. They have some sessions where people come online and share some of this practice. So I think there is a lot of opportunities to set up some of these elements. I see I've got another question and more. Okay. Luke Schmidt from Suez telling me, thank you, very complete. Breakthrough innovation must be anticipated. Yes, we need to go up, look at the problems, understand the problem from the very start, be a priority for the whole company to make innovation happen. Yeah, it's never just purchasing, it's everyone working together. So a strong common vision to focus the energy in the same way. Yes, in the organic approach. We need to be ready to take people on a regular basis out of the traditional category way to put them on some of these big company projects. We've set up outstanding category organization. We need to be able to have a resource, a pool of people that on a regular basis we can put on some of these company projects that makes a difference. And I've got a suggestion from Janegret. We publish one pager on our company intranet highlighting supplier innovation. It helps with the stories you mentioned and makes them 24/7 globally available inside the company. So yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's not just about sharing the stories within the purchasing organization, sharing the stories with the suppliers, sharing the stories with everyone in the company. And I think that's, you know, how we manage to get to a point where we change the perception, where, you know, we have more space to create autonomy for us to go ahead. Few suggestions, you know, organize a workshop, bring your people. We can help with this. Pick the behaviors you want to cherish. Create a book of stories, you know. Make sure you've got some key people aligned afterward to develop an implementation plan. What will be your communication plan? And create 3 rituals, one in a week, every week, one a month, and once a quarter, in order to start spreading the message. So this is something you can do with, you know, you bring your buyers together from time to time, get them to work on the most important behaviors, the stories, and then start to, you know, replicate, duplicate by having a lot of these elements. Okay, I think I will ask you to go for a final survey. So let me I need to find my survey. Creatable. C'est laquelle? 5. Yeah. So this is some feedback. The idea for me is to be able to understand the relevance of the whole participatory design process we've done in terms of the innovation culture. So really, this is just for me to get an input from you about do you think this cultural framework could be of use for your organization? Okay. So I'm starting to get to the same numbers as before. So Chuck, share the results. So interesting. So I see some very positive views on, you know, maybe it's not just about taking just these behaviors, but you know, going in this direction, using this as a framework that can help you thinking about it. So, well, thanks a lot for this feedback. So, what else? What else? I think I need to thank you for being with us. I need to thanks for the questions you've been sharing. I'm at your disposal. You know, share with me some of your stories. Come back to me with your experience. If you've done things, share them with me. We can still maybe put it in the final document. I think it's very important to progress in that direction. And this is really something that can make a difference in terms of organization by reflecting on the values, the behaviors. This is the way forward in terms to get more organic type of organization and making sure that we can move ahead toward the right directions. We've been using Icon from the Moon project, and I would like to thank everybody for joining. And I look forward to see you next year for a new series of webinars, but also, you know, join our workshop, join our conference, and you can also come to EIPM for training. Thanks again. I wish you a very pleasant day, and have a great end of the year and Christmas coming soon. Bye-bye.